Welcome to the Retirement Outsiders Podcast. I'm your host, Steve, and I'm joined by my wife and co-host, Tony. The focus of this podcast is to discuss various retirement topics from an outsider's point of view. In terms of this podcast, an outsider is someone who is not retired, someone who is not a financial advisor, someone who is not a CPA, lawyer, or healthcare advisor. I'm an engineer, and Tony is a teacher. We've been preparing for retirement for several years. We've encountered many different opportunities and obstacles throughout our careers and our paths to retirement. Early on, so much of it was intimidating. Our intent is to make some sense out of all the financial, accounting, estate planning, and healthcare jargon from an outsider's perspective. In addition, we will discuss some of the behavioral aspects that come with not being tied down to a 9-to-5 job. Welcome to the Retirement Outsiders Podcast. Good afternoon, Tony. How are you?
I'm good, as usual.
Awesome. We've got a fun one today, another fun one. We got estate planning and retirement destinations, a couple of topics there. Now, estate planning, basically wills and trusts, right? And then retirement destinations, just kind of places we've pondered on and maybe, who knows, might one day retire to.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So before you get started, I do want to say that we said that last episode was going to be fun. And then at the end, we were like, maybe that wasn't very fun. This one, second part's going to be fun. First part is, it can make people very uncomfortable.
It's more of a lecture, the first part.
Yeah.
If you like being lectured, you will enjoy this.
Yeah.
But before we get started, we've got an email address, retirementoutsiders@gmail.com. So if you got any questions, feel free to shoot us a note there, retirementoutsiders@gmail.com. Also, our YouTube channel, if you could do us a favor, if you could give us a thumbs up on those videos and subscribe to the channel, we'd appreciate it. And then also the podcast. If you're listening to it on the podcast, if you could leave us a 5-star review, that would be awesome.
Cool.
Thank you in advance.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's dig into estate planning. So why is estate planning important? Having a will, having a trust, those are the two basic areas I'll cover. But the simple answer is if you don't have a will and you don't have a trust, the government's going to decide where all your stuff goes. So if you're cool with that, then you really don't need a will or a trust, I suppose.
Yeah.
You cool with that?
No.
Yeah. Most people wouldn't be, most people shouldn't be. So we're going to start with the easy one, the will. Wills are pretty simple. I think most people know what a will is, but it's basically a legal document that says, hey, this is where I want my stuff to go. A will has to go through probate, which is a court supervised process. That's very public, or it can be very public. So it's all on public record. So anything that you have in your will, if someone wanted to look it up, they could theoretically. I don't think anyone's going to be interested in looking up our wills, but they are public record.
Really?
Yes, ma'am. Before
they're utilized?
No. During the probate process. So,
okay, so you have to be dead.
Yeah, and basically the main driver for that is it gives creditors an opportunity to say, hey, that person or those people owe me money.
Right.
So I have a claim to some of their estate.
Okay, that's a relief. And I mean, it is a relief just because I'm thinking to myself, I don't want people looking at my stuff.
Yeah. I don't really care. I don't have anything to hide, but that's the reason for it. So there's an automatic 3-month waiting period, and this is for Indiana, and most states are similar. So if you're in a different state, look up all the details if you're interested. But there's a 3-month waiting period, and that's when creditors can stake their claim. And then the total time it takes to probate a will, the average time is 6 to 12 months. If it's a very small estate and there's not a lot going on, it can be a lot quicker. But 6 to 12 months is what we're talking. So that's the other thing is, you have to if you only have a will and you don't have maybe some smaller younger kids and things of that nature, they're going to have to wait many, many months before anything is divvied out to them. There's one other option, a small estate affidavit that can be used after 45 days after the person or people have passed away. That is for an estate that's worth under $50,000. So that is a little bit quicker. I actually filled out one of those for my parents. They had one straggler bank account that was not attached to a will or a trust, and it was just in, I guess, my mom's name at that time. And so I had to fill out a small estate affidavit because it was, I don't know, a couple $100 or something that was in there. So, so that's a will. A will is very much, it's very much, hey, here's the directions, what we want to do. And it happens. The court supervises it. It happens. It's done. And it's done. There's nothing that hangs on after that will has been probated. A trust, on the other hand, can be very, very much different. Typically, if you have a trust, you'd have a will. And the will just says, do whatever the trust says. That's a very typical way to do things.
Okay.
The reason to have a will at all would be if you forget to put things into your trust. So when you have a trust, you have to assign all of your possessions, your retirement accounts, your house, your car, stamp collection, whatever you own, whatever stuff you own, and whatever money you own has to be assigned explicitly into the trust. So you can imagine you write up a trust, and 5 years later, you buy a guitar or a car or something, and you forget to put that into the trust, and then you pass away and you don't have a will. Now, once again, that item, since it's not covered in the trust, would have to go through the probate process without a will. So again, the government decides who would get that particular item.
Oh, okay.
Makes sense? So the reason to have the will is to at least have the will, so the will gets probated versus it just having to go through the court system without even a will.
Okay.
Makes sense.
And this is, I've heard people say, what do I care? I'm dead. Let them figure it out. And that's the easy way out, I think. And if you have a family that you hate and you really do want to make things difficult, that's the way to go. But if you genuinely love the people that are going to get your money or get your stuff or whatever, you want to make it as easy for them as possible.
Well, yeah, you joke around, but honestly, one of the main reasons to have a will or a trust is if you might have some family members that you don't want to get anything, and the court doesn't look at family feuds or behavior or, well, my Uncle Bill always said he didn't like his brother. That doesn't count. It's that person's your child. You have 3 children. Your children each get a third of the estate. I mean, it's kind of that simple. If you had 3 kids, you die without a will, 99.999% of the time, the court is going to say we're splitting it 3 ways between each of the kids.
Unless your spouse is...
Unless you still have a spouse or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
So here's a question. Did you look up or do you know what the order of operations is? So if you don't have kids and you don't have a will, but you've got an estate, let's say like your Prince. Prince famously did not have a will. And so sounds like the lawyers had a great time with that because they had to figure out, because he had half siblings anyway. Yeah,
it all depends on who's staking a claim. If no one stakes a claim, I don't know what they would do if you had zero. First they're going to look for family. If they can't find any family, they probably donate it to the state. I think the state would tend to get it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's,
and again,
regardless of what it is, it's clearly not what you would want.
Right.
Or what you had signed up for. So, a trust, again, it's a legal contract that has a trustee, and that the job of that trustee is to ensure that all the assets in it are managed the way that the trust says. So the trust says, this is what we want, and this is the person or people who we were giving trustee status to, and they are obligated to do whatever that trust says. For example,
this usually the same as the executor, or that, you know what I mean?
an executor is of a will, and a trustee is of a trust. Yeah, I think it's just different terminology for essentially the same thing.
Okay.
The difference, again, is a trust can live and last for years, decades, or more.
Mm-hmm.
A will gets probated, it's done, it's over.
Okay.
And there's a reason for that.
Okay.
So the reason why you would want to set up a trust, there's a number of different reasons, but some of the common reasons would be, for example, if you had, whether it's young kids or relatives, people you wanted to give something to, but you wanted to have some kind of rules in terms of timing and amounts behind it, other than they get 25%. So if you wanted to say, hey, right now I'm writing this trust, I have a teenage daughter. If I die before she's 25, I don't want her to get anything, maybe no money until she's 25. And then what I want to do is she's going to have X% of whatever's left, and she's going to get a portion of that every year. The first week of January, she should be written a check, and so on and so forth. So it's a way to protect, someone who maybe is young or otherwise not a great decision maker from blowing a bunch of money all in one shot. So there's a time component to a trust. That's one of the keys. Also, a trust occurs essentially right away. You can start divvying out money the day after. There's no probate period. There's no waiting. The trustee has that power to just start writing checks and, following whatever the trust says. But there is no waiting period. So that's the other advantage to a trust over a will. Yeah, makes sense?
So I guess my question then is, well, what if it's not a huge estate and they start writing checks and the creditors show up and they want their money? Does that come out of the trustees? Do they back owe then?
No. So the trust is not the people that wrote the trust. So that's another advantage of a trust. It is not susceptible to creditors, because the trust is its own thing. Think of it kind of like it's like a company. If you and I owed a bunch of money to a bunch of creditors and we started a trust and started putting things into that trust, we owe those people something our trust doesn't.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So how do you actually, put things into your trust? Because the trust is a legal document written up by a lawyer. So, one of the things you can do and should do is you go through all of your accounts. So you're going to have, your IRAs, 401ks, bank accounts, et cetera. You can name beneficiaries and should name beneficiaries in those funds. So what you do is you name the trust as the beneficiary. So every trust actually has a title. It's typically the, two people's names or one person's names, irrevocable or revocable trust. So typically when you write a trust when you're still living, it's revocable, meaning you can make changes to it. And then the second the last person that was part of that trust passes away, it becomes irrevocable. At least that's one of the ways to do it. So now no changes can be made. Whatever is in there is in there.
So let's say you and I have a trust and we are, we've made that trust together and one of us predeceases the other one. The living one can completely change all that.
That is true. And that's true for a will or a trust.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. The only way that you could avoid that is if you created an irrevocable trust while you were alive. And I don't know exact, again, I'm not an estate lawyer. I've done some research and dabbled because my parents had a trust and I was the trustee for that. So, I dug into what was applicable, thank you, to us. And, but I believe you can just make one irrevocable. It's just that it's just that. If you change your mind when you're still alive, you got yourself a problem.
And what pops into my mind, and maybe other people's minds as well, but when I think about that particular question I just asked regarding like spousal things, I think that that's something people need to be aware of, particularly if they're getting married later in life and they've made most of their money individually, and then you want to, you want to make sure that you are circumventing the spouse gets everything rule.
Well, yeah, I mean,
maybe.
There's obviously everybody would want to have options, I would think. So you want to look at your options, talk to an estate lawyer. I mean, that's the key. I'm given some of the knowledge that I've learned over the years, but I'm not an estate lawyer. So that would, if I'm going to recommend anything, it would be to honestly work with your financial advisor first, pull in a estate lawyer, ideally along with your financial advisor, especially if you got some more complicated things, because they can work together to tailor up the best package that really works for you and or your family. So now I mentioned beneficiaries on your brokerage account, your bank account, your life insurance, your 401k, everything, right? You can name a trust as a beneficiary, and all that money or whatever it is goes into that trust. The other thing you can do, and this is an option for anybody.
Would you say that again? Because
say what again?
That's very important. You can name your trust.
Yeah.
So if it's the Steve & Tony Trust, instead of putting your child as a beneficiary of a 403b, you would say that money goes to the Steve & Tony Trust.
Well, yeah, and if you're doing a trust, in most cases you would want to do that, because let's face it, you probably have multiple accounts. You probably have, old IRAs that used to be 401ks from multiple different jobs. You have your, when you retire, you roll your 401k over into an IRA. You have a checking account. I mean, you have a brokerage account. You have maybe 10, 20 accounts, whatever, right? So to go in and put beneficiaries and say, hey, each one of these accounts, we've got 4 kids or whatever, so each one 25%. It's a lot easier, frankly, to just go in and say it goes all to the trust, and then in the trust you say each kid gets 25%.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes the paperwork a little bit easier.
Okay.
Now, there's also another thing you can do that also avoids probate, and also it avoids anything to do with a will or a trust. That's, you can name your beneficiaries as people. So if you have, I don't care what your will says or what your trust says. If you have an account and the beneficiaries are people and they get X percent, that happens outside the will or the trust. That has nothing to do with your will or trust. So that's another thing to think about, especially if you do have beneficiaries on your account and then you do set up a trust or a will. Understand the beneficiary is the first gatekeeper. Whatever the beneficiary on your account says, it doesn't matter what your will or trust says. So you need to go in there and kind of keep those up to date as your family changes, as your opinion on who should get what changes. You want to make sure those are up to date.
Okay, so we're talking accounts. How about life insurance policies?
Same thing.
You can name a trust
as
your beneficiary on a
Absolutely.
life insurance policy. Okay.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Well, that's how my mom's was.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. I changed it to that because of what I learned. She had it, the beneficiary was dad, but dad had passed away before mom. So now it could have been a problem, because it wasn't.
It wasn't part of the trust.
It would have gone to the will because it wasn't part of the trust. And all the will said was do whatever the trust says. So there could have been a problem there.
So before she passed,
I switched it over.
As power of attorney, you went in and switched it. Yep. Okay.
And as the trustee.
The trustee. Okay, cool.
So beneficiaries. Yeah, thanks. There's also like bank accounts. For example, some of these accounts, it's weird to me. Like and I don't know if this is universal. The accounts I've dealt with have been this way. A normal savings or checking account doesn't have beneficiaries. you can't put a beneficiary on it, but you can put what's called a transfer on death on it, which essentially is the same thing. It says, hey, whoever owns this bank account, if that person dies, this person now owns the bank account. So it's the same thing as a beneficiary as far as I understand it. It's just different terminology. So that would be another thing, if you're in charge of your aging parents or aging relatives, it's very uncomfortable, but having a discussion on all these accounts, making sure that they are set up the way that your loved ones want them to be set up, is a conversation you should have with them. And frankly, if you're the trustee or their trusted relative to handle their estate, then it's your job to do that, even if it's a little uncomfortable. But it makes things a lot more comfortable later on when you're not dealing with paperwork and phone calls and legal matters. Okay, so recommendations. The number one recommendation is always talk with a financial advisor, and in this case, an estate lawyer, to set up your situation. Make sure all your accounts have the right beneficiaries on them to avoid any kind of probate or any other issue.
And by the way, that sounds easy. It is not.
It takes time.
It takes time.
Yeah. It can take time.
It's not just putting names. You have to have social security numbers.
Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes, hey, I think we have, can't remember how many beneficiaries we've put on things, but I've run into a situation where, account A, no problem. Totally fine. Put all the information in 5 minutes. Account B, you can only put 4 online. If you want to put more than 4, you have to fill out a piece of paper and fax it in or something stupid like that. So
because it's 1994.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is use a trust if you have other real assets you want to avoid probate or give the stuff away before you die. So if a real asset is like a physical thing, a house. You can put your house in a trust. You can do that.
Should we talk about what we have in our trust? The thing you're sitting on right now?
A blanket. No.
Blanket.
No, we don't.
Our daughter
talk
gets
about that.
The blanket.
Like I said, you can put, like I have a guitar collection, right? And that is in our trust to be given out. The other thing I can do, if I'm 87 and I know I'm dying, I can just give all my guitars to somebody. So you can just do that beforehand if you want as well. It's, and if it's still in the trust, there's no more guitars left, so they're gone. No big deal. Right?
Maybe. I've seen some really bad Agatha Christie movies.
Yeah, right. Okay, so speaking of, I talked a little bit about helping out your aging folks. Talk a little bit, very, very briefly about Medicaid. A lot of us, as we age, we need more and more care. And if you need long-term health care and you don't have the insurance, it's very expensive. We're talking, $8,000 a month for a person in a full like Alzheimer's type care facility
or more.
And obviously, even if you had $1 million in your bank account, that goes away pretty fast. And so Medicaid, what is Medicaid? Medicaid is essentially the state takes over and takes care of you, and you only have to pay a small amount based on what you actually own. Well, what you actually own is, everything you actually, like your house. They can make you sell your house and pay the bill, and you get all the way down to owning $2,000 worth of stuff. In Indiana, anyway, the number's 2,000. Once you get to 2,000, and that's all you have, then the state will come in and start helping you out. One of the things that you can do is you can set up a very special type of trust called a qualified income trust or a Miller trust to put all of your things and money into, similar to a normal trust, if you will. And those items, those monies will not be subject to the Medicaid spend down. The problem with it is you have to do that 5 years before you need the Medicaid help. So it's one of those things where if you have an aging parent and you can kind of see the writing on the wall that, hey, maybe their parents and their grandparents all lived to be a very old age, and maybe they had issues that required some extra help, that might be a conversation you have with your folks too, is, maybe we want to put this into a trust now,
right? So
that there's something left for the family when it's time to put you into a facility.
This becomes, I think, if you've got, this is just awful, but it's something that needs to be talked about. And that is, if you have a parent who is physically relatively healthy, but are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, you need to probably get on board with that plan sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Because when that disease progresses and care becomes very difficult, the last thing you want to do is cash in your house.
Yeah, exactly. And talk about uncomfortable conversations, but, it can save a lot of issues down the road. And there's very specific lawyers that deal in that arena. And frankly, Tony and I have dealt with one. So if anyone is looking for a recommendation, feel free to shoot us an email. I'd be happy to let you know what our experience was. But
and is.
Yeah, and currently is.
Yes.
But that is estate planning.
That is estate planning.
Fun stuff.
There's a lot more to it, but I feel like you hit the thought-provoking stuff that maybe some people need to hear. And I think when people hear estate planning, they think big amounts. Well, I don't have that much, or, and they think I don't have that much. It doesn't. Your stuff matters. No matter what your job is or what you own or whatever, your stuff matters. It matters to you. It's your day-to-day existence. You want to make sure that what you have goes where you want it to go.
And you want to make it a clean process for your loved ones.
You do.
You don't want it to have to be something where they got to go into a probate court and explain that they're the son or they're the daughter. And I mean, it's just, it makes it a lot easier if you set it up the right way and everyone's happy.
Yep. Let's talk about something that in my mind is just fun.
Let's do it. We could use an upper here.
Where do you want to live when you retire? This is something that some people have an absolute plan for, and then there's other people that are, back and forth, have a general, I'd like to look out the door and see some palm trees.
I would.
I'm pretty sure I would. Of course, it's really, we're a little biased right now because, January, but are you going to stay put? You want to keep your house? Do you want to downsize? Are you doing the camper thing? How about your family? You want to be close? Do you want to be closer? How about expat? Are you somebody that's like, let's get out of Dodge and go live in some island nation and do that thing? There's so many options. And it's something that you want to make sure that if you're dealing with a partner, you're both clear. So I'm going to use some data from the 2023 census that I found online in a 2025 article on the Smart Asset website. And so here's some numbers, all right, before I start talking about what Steve and I have in the planning stages. So somewhere between 20 and 27% of retirees relocate. They move elsewhere upon retirement. Some of the drivers of those migrations, I love that terminology, by the way, are climate, cost of living, state taxes, or basically lack of state taxes, and proximity to family. And this I found not very surprising at all. Who are the people that are leaving where they live? Who are the people, the most people leaving? We've got California. People leave California. they want to go somewhere else to retire. New York City, Chicago, Denver, and the DC area. Those are the top 5.
Yeah, it makes sense. Areas where you make a ton of money, but it's very expensive to live. So you have a house that in Indiana would look like it should be $500,000, but you can sell it for $1.5 million in California and then settle in Indiana and have yourself a nice little mansion.
Book it to Tennessee and live your best life. Yep. Where are they going? And no surprises. Number 1 is Florida. And Florida is, interestingly, the only state in the top 5 that doesn't have state tax. Number 2 is North Carolina. 3 is Arizona. 4 is South Carolina. And 5, this surprised me, is Georgia. Surprise you too?
Georgia, maybe a little bit, but probably just because I don't know. I know that I believe that their state taxes are very low. They're not 0, but I think they're very low.
Okay. All right. So when Steve and I started talking about where we wanted to be when we retired, we had a really big long list. We had a lot of stuff. These were multiple conversations over dinners over the years. Probably started in our 40s. We started really doing this and then realized this is, after being together 20 plus years and kind of running out of some things to talk about, this kind of like little old conversational fire. And we really had a lot of fun talking about this and still do. We get into fights that aren't really fights about, why this one's better than the other one. And it's a good time. So instead of narrowing it down, the list got bigger. So I'm glad that's the way it went. I think Steve's glad that's the way it went because we kind of developed a lighthearted, fun way to kind of back and forth between what's really going to be most important to each of us individually, because we are in very different people. And so it's sometimes hard to remember that because we are a we. And so that kind of helped with this conversation. So we lived in Illinois when we started talking about this, and it was very close to Chicago. And while we loved the experience of living where we lived for a variety of reasons, we had no intentions of spending any more time there than we had to, because the property taxes were stupid. And it was basically Indiana, but like way more expensive, and nobody needed that.
Yeah, agreed.
So here are some of the plans that we've talked about over the years, and I'm going to list these. These are listed sort of as the least likely to most likely as of today. This can always change. These are I like to think that every single one of these is still a possibility, even though probably not really true.
Typically in any given day, I change my mind more than once.
Yes.
So.
Yes, especially for the bottom couple.
Yeah.
So number 1 is my favorite dream, but not going to happen, is the expat somewhere in Europe or Mexico or some island nation. If this is something that you're particularly interested in, I am going to recommend a podcast called Retire There. And there's a couple from New York.
New York, yeah.
They're out of New York, and they are not retired yet, or they're very close to retirement.
I think they might be now.
I think they might be now, but this is an older this podcast has been around for a while.
Yeah.
And they have people, singles and couples, come on, and they have moved somewhere, or they're in the process of moving somewhere, and why. And most of it's in the United States, but they talk to people all over the world. People who live, Far East, Europe, Caribbean, Mexico, all kinds of stuff. And it is fascinating. They're really, it's a fun podcast. Even if you're not interested in doing that, it definitely brings some cool ideas. Another show that we've watched that's on YouTube is called Go With Less. And this couple retired early, and they house sit in all over the place, but in Europe. is the place that I'm most interested in.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's websites you can go to where you sign up to house sit, or a lot of them are include pets, and they just go and they sit in these houses, and in particular, I think maybe the more interesting ones are the ones that are not in a vacation destination, heart of a city or whatever. Like maybe they're in a suburb or something like that. So you get a little bit of a different
France.
feel.
I think one I listened to or watched was they were in France in this little town, and they talked about the food and the walkability. They were there for 2 weeks. And if you're a really good host or not host, whatever it's called, you're a really good sitter and you get good reviews, you're going to be saying no to some of these because they want, apparently there's a lot of people in Europe who don't spend the entire year at home and they want people in their home. So that's a cool one. That's a fun one. Probably not going to do that, but boy, we sure like the idea.
Yeah, and that's something you can do for a week at a time. You want to go on vacation for a week, you go to wherever, whether it's in the States or not, and the idea is basically you sit for free, but you stay there for free-ish. And worst case, or best case, you get a little bit of money to do it. But I think the main point is you try to look for one to make a wash. Like you're staying in their place for free. You got some jobs to do. You got to make sure the pipes don't freeze.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're not going in the winter, but walk their dog, feed their dog,
water the garden, whatever. Okay. So the third thing is buy an RV and follow the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah.
That's the dream, man.
That sounded a lot better 10 or so years ago, but
yeah, now it would just be a lesson in depression.
Now I might get a job with the Cardinals.
Yeah.
If I was a lefty, I probably could do some
that sounds
short
amazing.
relief,
Steve is a side note. Steve is a he likes an arena. He likes sporting places and checking out different stadiums. And so that would be a really cool, fun thing to do for a year or 2 years or whatever.
I could see doing that for a part of a summer, realistically, but not. I'm not that big of a baseball fan.
We've got friends who, actually our friend Jen, her dad used to, I don't know if he still does it, as part of his retirement, he and a bunch of buddies go down to Florida and they hang out and watch the Cubs spring training. And that's like their jam. And that would be super fun. So we could also buy an RV or a Sprinter van. We've seen some shows about that, and just travel all over North America. This is something Steve is more excited about than I am. He tried to sell some of it with me, like we could, sleep for free in Walmart's parking lot. And I'm not real excited about that. So I like the idea of it, but
we're not going to do that.
We're not going to do that.
At the end of the day, the crappy bed and no shower.
Oh my God, I know. Yeah, I love me a road trip, but
we'd be in a Holiday Inn within 12 hours of leaving wherever we left.
Our daughter has a story about that, but we're not going to let her on here to tell it. Number 5, take our first couple of years. This is one of mine. This is one of my favorites, but we're not going to do this either. Take our first couple of years of retirement that we're both both retired, and rent for 3 to 6 months in places we don't want to settle in, but would like to experience. Like for me, it'd be like New York City. Go live in New York City for 3 to 6 months. Steve is making faces right now.
I would never do New York City, but I would do maybe like small southern towns, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I
wouldn't want to do it somewhere where it's uber expensive.
Well, but if it's 3 or 6 months, then you can say, wow, I lived in Manhattan and I got to do that thing. I've read so many books that are based in that area.
Stabbed.
No, you didn't. No,
I got to get stabbed in Manhattan. It was awesome.
Stop. This is one that was really heartbreaking for us. We went to Wyoming. And all sorts of bells rang, and we just loved it. And we talked to people, and we looked at houses, and that's what quite frankly, when Steve and I travel, that's what we do anyway. We get on Zillow and we're checking out real estate all over the place, and every place we go, we're like, maybe maybe.
The big knock on Wyoming was we found out that their water table is extremely deep in the ground, and like most
at least
people,
where we were looking,
most people, if they don't live in an urban area with a city utility type situation, they don't even have wells because they can't afford to dig one that deep, and they have little water towers on their property and have water delivered, and I'm like, that just seems really strange to me.
Yeah.
I would, it's one thing to have propane delivered, I guess, to heat your house, but the fact that like you could run out of water technically,
yeah,
I don't think
you can always light a fire. You're not like producing water.
Right.
So in Wyoming, the other thing with Wyoming, as much as it was really appealing to us, where we were looking, where were we looking? Laramie?
Oh, we looked all over, but Laramie was one of the general areas.
One of the areas we really liked. In order to get back to where we live and to do anything, and to, if there was like a family emergency or anything, it could be like up to a full day of travel, because Denver's the closest like huge airport.
Yeah. And that's like 3 or 4. That's not that bad, but it's too far. It's just too far from people we love. So, probably not going to happen. Maybe that could be a 3 to 6 monther though.
Yeah.
See, I would do that in Wyoming for sure.
Yeah. Get a condo that'd be sweet. Put that on another list.
Yeah. Right.
All right. Take our first couple of years and rent in locations that we actually want to live in, and check those out before we actually, sign over, stuff. So like say, okay, well, Steve's actually a couple of times tried to talk me into Tennessee, and we're definitely looking at Florida. Let's go down there and spend 3 months in wherever, we're thinking about. Do that, something that's not just a dream place, but an actual, we really are serious about this before we actually do it. Florida's big. Florida's a big one, and we are very serious. We think about the villages. No jokes allowed. I was all over the jokes until we went there the first time, and I changed my mind pretty dramatically. We've been there the last 2 spring breaks. We've gotten Airbnbs and stayed for, spring break, and we really just dig it. So the villages in Florida is very exciting.
Yeah, that's number 1 on my list for sure.
And we like it for a couple of reasons. Florida is not weird. Florida is worrisome because of the weather. The villages is pretty much smack dab in the middle of Florida. So you're not going to get hit as hard by all of the hurricanes. I'm assuming.
I read an article about Disneyland, or is it Disney World there? Disney World. Back in the day when they were looking to find places to build that, apparently that part of Florida, they did some research and looked, and it was very unlikely to get any kind of direct hits from hurricanes. Like that's why they put it exactly where they put it in Orlando.
Okay. And how far is the villages?
It's probably a half hour-ish from Orlando.
Okay.
Half hour, 45 minutes.
Okay. So yeah, we're going to talk about the villages more probably on a later podcast and talk about why we like it, but we dug it. Now, One place we have not done much more than drive through is Dunedin. But I'm very interested in Dunedin because it is on the coast. So
Gulf Coast near Clearwater.
Near Clearwater. So you got an airport there, which is awesome. And it feels very small townish, which you don't see a lot of in Florida, in my opinion. When you get close to the coast, you're not getting that small town setting, and it feels that way. So if you've never eyeballed that area, go check it out. Even just to go and have dinner or whatever, if you're a Clearwater area vacationer, check it out. It looks really cool. And so another thing that we've talked about in regards to Florida is, do we just pick everything up and move there full time, dream home, get the pool, do the whole thing? Or do we try to do 2 homes, keep one close to family for, a chunk of the year, and then the rest, the villages or wherever else we decide to go in Florida? So that's where we're really kind of going back and forth. So we're on Zillow all the time in where we live right now, and are looking for, super cheap condos to come up so we can basically get that taken. We don't know. And then the last thing is stay where we are and keep our place. We love this house. So we love the idea of it, and maybe eventually downsize, but then maybe rent a place in Florida for 6 to 8 weeks in the horrible part of winter. That's another option.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our top 9. Actually, they're not top 9. We've really only got top 2 or 3, but lots of options, super fun conversations. We still don't know.
Yeah. Lots to think about.
Yeah.
We got time though.
A little bit.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
That's it.
All
right. Well, thanks for joining us today. We hope you'll join us again next time on the Retirement Outsiders.